Good evening, everyone. We are now in chapter 9 of Deuteronomy. Chapter 9 is a continuation from the last few chapters, and it is important for us to take note that these series of chapters that we are reading from chapters 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, it just carries on for a couple of chapters. And essentially, you find that Moses is recapping or recounting the things that has happened, and remember that it's addressing this generation of Israelites and to impress upon them not to repeat what had happened to the fathers, the generation that came out. And so now we again see this word, "Hear, O Israel." And the word "hear" is Shema. And each time you see this in chapter 6 and now chapter 9, it is actually an imperative. It is to tell the children of Israel, listen to what I have to say, and make sure you do something about it. And Israel refers to the entire 12 tribes, right? And it says here, you are to cross over to Jordan today. And make sure that we understand it is across the Jordan River, of which Moses was forbidden to cross. And here are the instructions prior to entering that they must remember to adhere to. And when they go into dispossess, now the idea of dispossess also means to possess. Now, this is one of those words in Hebrew where it's got meanings on both sides of the coin, right? Dispossess means to possess or take possession or inherit. And in this case, it is speaking about nations, or in this case, Goyim. And these are non-Israelite peoples who are greater. And when it talks about greater, these are greater in number. Mightier is stronger. Okay. So in number. And these are important descriptions because it's a reflection that they are going in to take over a land that God is giving them. But the original people are violent people. They are many of them, and they would not be in the mind of the Israelites somebody that they can actually just walk in and take over. And we'll talk about this shortly so that we understand why these words are said. These people are greater and mightier than yourself. That's the comparison, which means that you yourself, you're not that great a number, and you're not that strong, right? You have numbers, but you're not that big in number, and you're not that strong. They have great cities, fortified up to heaven. Now, this is an expression. It means that they have very high walls. If you recall, Jericho is one of those. When they were in their escapade with the king, with Sihon, the king Sihon, and King Og, the Amorite kings, they were both greater and mightier than the Israelites. They had cities that were big and great, and they had fortified walls. Now, in this case, they said they are a people great and tall. Understand this. In terms of great, this would be large in number. Okay. And perhaps this word tall here is also with the idea of in terms of height. And so they would be looking down at the Israelites. And these were the very reasons why the earlier generation dare not go in. And so now Moses reminds them they are the descendants of the Anakim. The Anakim are, well, I guess the word Anak. The word Anak is neck. And so Anakim would be necks in the plural. And these are the sons of the Anakim, which means that they probably reflected people who are taller in height and perhaps with longer necks. And I guess maybe that's why the word Anak is used. It's about their necks and it's extended. Now, you need to understand they are afraid, and they ought to be, because these are not your normal neighbors whom you know and whom you heard it, who can stand before the sons of Anak. Now, let me just take a pause here and remind ourselves in chapters 2 and 3, when we talked about them coming up north from Sinai, and they were told not to disturb Edom, not to disturb Moab, and not to disturb Ammon. And understand that the Edomites took the land from the Horites. The Moabites took the land from the Emims, who are like the Anakim. The Ammonites took the land from the Zamzumim, that is also like the Anakim, big and tall. And these were done a while back. And now the rest of them, if you recall, King Og were the remnants of the Rephaim, the so-called big people. And they defeated King Og, and Moses led the troops. And now on this side of the Jordan, before they cross over, Moses reminds them, well, across the river, they are the Anakim, right? Just don't think that everything is over. The Anakim, or the sons of Anak, will be the ones to contend with. And look at what Moses is telling them in verse 3. Understand today. The word understand is to know. Know today that the Lord your God is He who goes over before you as a consuming fire. Now, this word consuming fire is important. There is a pillar of fire, there's a pillar of cloud. But now the presence of God will cross the Jordan first. And this is an expression. You see, a consuming fire is when a fire comes down from heaven and it will eat up whatever is in its path. And God is portrayed as the one that nobody can stand in His sight and in His presence, and nobody can block God. And it's also a reminder to the Israelites that God is a consuming fire. And so be mindful and fear God, because He can destroy you just as He can destroy the other nations before you. And so we have read these kinds of words before, is that we know God is a conditional God, reminding them not to worship the idols and to destroy them. And so here Moses says God will destroy them and will bring them down before you, so that you shall drive them out and destroy them quickly, as the Lord has said to you. Now you need to understand the expression here, that He who goes over before you is an expression that God is going ahead of you. And then the ones who are going to do the fighting is you. You will do the driving out and destroying them quickly. And so what it means is God is telling them that do not be afraid. God is with you and He will enable you. Just like when they fought the King Sihon and King Og. And God enabled them. God went before them. God gave them the land, and they won those battles. And so this phrase that God, he who goes before you, is a phrase to give them the confidence, but they themselves is the ones that God will enable to do the fighting. And when they fight with these people, the descendants of Anakim and all the other nations who are before them, the Goyim, when they obey God, they possess a supernatural ability where if you were to look at them, there is no way on earth that the Israelites can ever win those wars, but they do. And hence the reference would be God is with them. And that is why God is using them to do the driving out and destruction. So understand that these are phrases, and when you need to look at it in combination, that God works with them and they will be the ones doing the fighting. Now, the reminder that God tells them is this. In verse 4, do not think in your heart. Now, the word think in your heart is to say. The Hebrew is very expressive and very vivid. And so we use the word think because it's how we express in English. But in the Hebrew, God says, do not say in your heart. When that is expressed, do not say in your heart means you intend to say it, but you're not saying out through your lips, but you're saying out through your actions, your will, your mind. And that is what heart is all about. It's quiet, but it's through your actions. And that after the Lord your God has cast them out before you. What do you mean cast them out before you? It means when you go and fight and you win these battles, do not say in your heart, because of my righteousness. And the word righteousness is tzedakah. Just put this down, tzedakah. That what you have done right. God is saying, don't even talk about it. Don't say in your heart, and you think of it in your mind, that it is because of what you have done right before God that he has brought me to possess the land, to conquer and to win the land, right? That is not the case. That is not the case. Rather, the reason why you can do this is this, that one, it is because of the wickedness of this nation. Now, the word wickedness is comes from the word rasha, right? Something that they do wrong, something that they have departed from the right of God. Of these nations, the Goyim. And so the word wicked is not about how we normally think wickedness. They obviously have done things that has departed from what God has told them to do in many ways. That is in their culture, that they inherently would know, but they didn't do it. And all these nations are what God is saying, I am going to put judgment on you. And so God needs to drive them out from before you. And that's number one, judgment. It is nothing to do with their righteousness or uprightness of their heart. Now again, heart is your will and mind. And Moses is reminding them that nothing to do with your tzedakah. Nothing to do with your tzedakah. And nothing to do with your uprightness. And by uprightness, it means that they are right. And notice this is an A and a B, right? Both are talking about almost the same thing, that they are seen to be right before God because of what they have done. And the idea is no. You are not conquering them and winning because of what you have done, because you definitely did not do that. But you are going in to possess because of the wickedness of these nations, and that he may fulfill the word which God swore to them. And so now you have, number one, the wickedness, and number two, to complete. And so the idea here is to make stand. Now, the idea of make stand, the word which he swore, means he will make it come to pass. And so the word fulfill is a good word in English, but literally it means that God had made the promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he is going to make what he said come to pass, make it stand. But the other reason is because of these wrongs that these nations have done. And so it has nothing to do with the Israelites. Now, this particular reminder is important because I think it's very timely that when you go in and you win battles, sometimes it goes to their head. It's like, wow, we win it because I did it my way. We were great. We were smart. And God is telling them, no, I'm letting you win and possess the land because it is time for their wickedness to be dealt with. Now, this goes back to Genesis, all right? In Genesis chapter 15, where is that? Genesis 15, I think is in verse 17, no, verse 16. And what it says is that until the sins of the Amorites, the wickedness of the Amorites and all these nations, the time is up, that God is not going to wait for them to repent. Then, in the fourth generation and thereafter, God will bring these Israelites back to the land. And that is what God said to Abraham in Genesis 15, in the covenant with Abraham. And this in particular in chapter 9 is a reminder that you're going in to be used by God to complete what God has said to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's number one. And in so doing, to give the land to his descendants, it is also to complete the words that the sins of the Amorites are now complete. It is time to deal with these nations. And that is what it means by the wickedness of these nations, that God will use Israel to drive them out. So therefore, understand, just know this, that the Lord your God is not giving you this good land, Tov, right? Good in the eyes of the people, and I'm sure good in the eyes of God, to possess because of your righteousness. And the expression is this: not your righteousness, because in the eyes of God, you're seen as a stiff-necked people. And by the word people, it is right? It is not goy. Now, what is stiff-necked? The word stiff-neck is very literal, right? It means your neck is hard, right? Or hardened neck. And because they are Orientals, I think we also as Orientals use this word. This would be stubborn. That's what it means. Stubborn, difficult. And obviously, you know the Chinese expression that it says it's ngang gang. And these are people who are hardened necks. Yes. And the Hebrew expressions is very close to our expressions as well. And the idea here is exactly the same. That when the neck is stiffened, you are refusing to listen to God. And so God says, you are a stiff-necked people. You're not righteous before God. You have not been upright before God. And so reminding these generation of Israelites, your forefathers did this. And so it wasn't because what they have done as Israel, well, you have done nothing yet. And so whatever you are doing is to fulfill what God has said. And you are going in because God needs to pass judgment upon these people. Verse 7. God says, remember. Now, remember is to bring to mind. There are two words here. Bring to mind and always recall, and do not forget. Very seldom do you find these two words together, but today we find it. Remember and do not forget. And forget means is to ignore, is to stop caring. And so you have here what I would call an A and a B. Do not forget and remember are really about the same thing. And right now, we are going to see how Moses is going to recount, to recapitulate, to bring out the incidences to remind them, don't do it again. What are these things? Provoking means to make God angry. Can you make God angry? And the answer is yes. And they have done it a few times. And so God says, do not make angry in the wilderness, as it was in the wilderness, the day you left Egypt until you came to this place, you have been rebellious. And the idea of rebel, you'll be interested to see the word rebel is marah. And the place they did this initially was in Exodus chapter 16 and 17, when they first came to the waters that were bitter, and they were rebellious. They were marah against God, and God was angry with them. And the place was called Marah. Marah is to rebel, is to contend against God. Again, in Horeb, you again provoked God to wrath. So this word here, provoke, right? Provoke God to wrath, provoke God to wrath. This is the same word, right? Provoke God to wrath is to make him angry. So the first one was, you have been making God angry all this while. So let me just name you what you have done. Look at what they have done. And I think we will all remember this, that the Lord God was angry to have destroyed you. God wanted to destroy them. Why? Because at Horeb, what happened at Horeb? If you do not remember what happened in Horeb, then we have a very short memory. The Israelites are to remember and do not forget. Absolutely do not forget. So what happened in Horeb? Now remember, Horeb is another name for Sinai. Why was God angry with them at Sinai? God was angry with them at Sinai because of the golden calf. Golden calf. And so let us look at the recollection of this particular incident. Moses went up to the mountain to receive the tablets of stone, called the tablets of the covenant. Now, first of all, you must know that tablets of stone describe the what do you call the base, right? The base of what it was written on, and the covenant is the content that was written. And this is what God has said. God has made a covenant with you. And if you go back and read Exodus chapter 24, they said, whatever the Lord says, we will do. And that was a covenant. And Moses went up and stayed in the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. He was fasting, neither ate bread nor drank water. And God delivered means gave, 2 tablets of stone written with the finger of God. Literally. This is the first time we ever see that the finger of God was to write. Right? The finger of God wrote this. And it was written on stone. So this is an expression that somehow the words were written on stone, and and I think that is how our modern day expression is. Is it cast in stone? It comes from the Bible. If it's cast in stone, it cannot change. And so the 2 tablets of stone refers to the fact that God used his finger and gave this as a covenant with his people. And on them were all the words which the Lord had spoken to you on the mountain from the midst of fire in the day of the assembly. And that was starting in Exodus chapter 19. And so we always come back in chapter 19 because that's where it begins. This peculiar and unique relationship between God and the Israelites, or the nation of Israel, started in Exodus chapter 19. And now, at the end of 40 days and 40 nights, the Lord gave me the 2 tablets of stone, the tablets of the covenant. And so with this, you know that this is speaking about the same, right? It's speaking about the same. And so it was here when they received the 10 commandments. And while the 40 days and 40 nights Moses was up in the hill, what did they do? In verse 12, God told Moses, arise, go down quickly, for your people. Now that's really interesting. You would find this expression. I'm not sure whether you have this kind of a conversation. So when the father is angry with the children, the father will tell the mother, it says, your children is very naughty. Or the mother will tell the father, your children are very naughty. You know, essentially it is an expression, and it's very oriental. And God turns around and says, you brought the people out. Moses is your people. But then we do know that God made the covenant. So in this, you can see that it is an expression of frustration and anger. Whom you brought out of Egypt, they have acted corruptly. Now you need to understand what it means by corruptly. The idea of this is connected because God says that these are the people who have, well, I guess you can say in the intensive, they have ruined everything. And they have turned aside from what God has said, from the way which I commanded them. And this would be an A and a B. You must be able to see the A and B here. They have acted corruptly. They have ruined everything. They have turned aside from the way which I commanded them. So there's an A and a B. What did they do? And it is described in detail. They made themselves a molded image. And the idea of a molded image is about melting metal and then pour it into a mold. And then it comes out as a complete shape. And so there was an image. Now, if you recall, in the past few chapters, God says, do not have any images made on earth, in the sky, or under the sea. Do not have any other gods. I am a Kana God. I will destroy you. I will visit you with judgment to the third and fourth generation. And he goes on and says that if you come across any of these idols, do not serve them, do not bow down to them, destroy them, burn them all up, because if you don't, I will destroy you. And now God goes back and gives them a lesson. The lesson is to remind them, when Moses was up in Mount Sinai, they acted corruptly. They ruined that relationship. They ruined what they have said, yes, they will do. They turned aside from the commands. They said, yes, God, everything you have said, we will do. And then they didn't. In fact, the most important thing there is in Exodus chapter 20, in what we call the 10 Commandments. It says, hear ye, O Israel, I am the Lord your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make any images. And there they made themselves a molded image. Furthermore, the Lord spoke to me, saying, I have seen this people. Now, verse 13 again, God is never talking about them as his people. This people, your people. And they have not, and God is not saying that this is my people, because God doesn't want to associate himself right now, because he is very angry. They are a stiff-necked people. Again, hard-necked. You know what it means, right? Stubborn. And so God says, let me alone, that I may destroy them, blot out their name from under heaven. Now, you know this word, the idea of blot out. Blot out really means to rub out. You know, in the old days, you put some oil, some grease onto ink, right? Whatever the dye is, and then you can slowly rub and the dye will go off. And so you could have it on a parchment or on a skin, and you've written something down with some form of an ink, and you can actually put some grease and some oil and slowly rub it off. And that is what it means by blot out. Blot out their name, their Shem. Now, we have seen that God wants them in chapters 8 and 9, in 7 and 8, to go in and conquer the land, so that all these nations will no longer be remembered. The names will be no more. And now God is reminding them there in chapter 32, right? In Exodus chapter 32 is this incident that God says, I want to blot out their name. I don't want to remember them anymore. And I will make of you, remember this incident of Moses. And God says, I'll start again. A nation mightier and greater than they. I am tired of this stiff-necked people. Bring them out of Egypt, and they still behave like that. And God was very, very angry and disappointed. So I think disappointment is not the word. I think very angry would be the right word, because he never called them his people. He called them your people, Moses. He called them this people. They are the stiff-necked people, and I want to blot out their name. And that's how angry God was. Verse 15, and again, this is a recall of Exodus 32. Moses turned, came down from the mountain, and the mountain burned with fire, and the two tablets of covenants in my two hands, must be big ones. And then I looked and I saw that you had sinned against the Lord your God. What do you mean, sin? In verse 16, the idea here is khata, right? To miss. God gave you 10 commandments. Well, let's call it 10 commandments or 10 statements. Well, maybe you have followed all 9, but this particular one you missed. Does it matter? Well, I think what is being expressed here is how God views the covenant and the statements that were made to them, the words that were said to them, the Devarim. Although God made these 10 statements and they probably followed 9, but just missed 1. That's what it means by miss. They missed this against the Lord God. They didn't miss it against Moses. They missed it against God. And you've made yourself a molded calf. Now understand this. In verse 16, it says, you made yourself a molded calf. And you need to understand this is actually a bull calf. Now, what do you mean by a bull calf? The bull calf would be, number one, it is a male. Right? It's a male. So it has horns. And then it is a calf because it is small. That's all it's saying. They didn't make a great, big, gigantic molded calf. They made themselves a small golden calf that is male with horns. And you would see that it would be the Aleph, right? The Aleph and the Lamed. This would be the El, that's their God, the molded calf. And they have turned aside quickly from the way which the Lord had commanded you. And I took the 2 tablets and I threw them out of my 2 hands and broke them before your eyes. So let's look at these words here in verse 17. I took. Took means to how do you say this? Seize. He seized the 2 tablets, and then the action here is to throw, to cause them to cast down. And so, stones and cast down out of his hands, the thing that will happen is that it will break. Right? It will break in pieces before your eyes. So it's all very visual. That God says, you have broken my covenant. And I fell down before God. Now, we didn't see this as a continuous description in Exodus 32, but it was related again to us here. That Moses says he went up, he fell down before God, and he's talking about the time of the first 40 days and 40 nights. And so we need to see this as one episode, right? And I fell down continues from before verse 15. Before he came down the mountain. He was still up there for 40 days and 40 nights. At the first, and this tells you of the earlier incident where he did not eat or drink water because of all your sin. Now, when he was up there, he received the commandments of God, and now he refers to the same 40 days and 40 nights, and he's saying, I didn't eat bread or drank water. Now, because of your sin, verse 18, your chata, your miss, you just missed this. that you had committed, and notice the word committed means to perform. You did it. So all of this is very concrete. You actually did it, and you did wicked. Now, this word wicked is no longer ruin. This word wicked is ra, right? It is ra, and it means evil. Evil in the eyes of the Lord. And so remember, evil and good is always in the eyes of God. And in this case, what they did was evil in the eyes of God. And this provoked him to anger. The idea of provoking him to anger is to make him angry. And so everything in chapter 9, that God getting angry is about that molded calf, the bull calf, the small little idol that they made, and they treated as El, right? Treated as El. I was afraid of the anger of God. Now the word afraid is not yare. The word afraid here is enough. And this word afraid is, how should you say, it is reflected on, how should you say, it's reflected about, let's see, sorry. The word afraid is yagor. Sorry, yeah? Yagor. The word afraid is yagor. It means to be very afraid. It is, how should you say? It is afraid when they see the anger of God. So this is an expression of fear that God is already expressing his anger, right? Expressing his anger. And this word anger here is not your regular anger. This word anger is your displeasure. It's about this, God's nose being flared out, and he's breathing heavy, right? He's breathing heavy. And that's the expression that God was very angry. And the word hot displeasure is another expression. This is about the rage. And so we have an A and a B, speaking about the same anger, that God is particularly angry. Particularly angry. And then this word angry with you is to burst out. Burst out in rage. Now, in the Hebrew, you find that you have a few words. You have one word here, you have one word here, you have one word here, and then you have the third word here, and all of these are nuances of anger. And so in verse 19, it is to say that God is so angry, and he has said it 3 times in various ways, that he is going to destroy you. But God, listen to me. And the word listen here is to intercede. Intercede. And the word intercede is to pray. Now, it is not about our concept of prayer. the idea here of to intercede is to talk on behalf of the Israelites at that time. And the Lord was very angry with Aaron. Why? Because Aaron was the mouthpiece for Moses, and yet he listened to the people and made this molded calf. And so God also wanted to destroy him. And so I interceded for Aaron as well. And so God listened to Moses about Israel. God also listened to Moses about Aaron. Then you must understand that God was extremely, extremely angry. And so God and Moses says, I took your sin, whatever you have done. What was it that you have done? The calf that you made. So you notice this is an A and this is a B. What did he miss? They missed the 10 commandments by one command. Do not make any images, whether on earth, in heaven, or in the earth below. That is the calf which you have made. And that in itself is an A and a B. And he burned it with fire, crushed it to the ground until in very small pieces, until as fine as dust. I threw its dust into the brook that descended from the mountain into that flow of water. Now, this is number one. Now, every time you see the number one, the first time that God relates the thing that he says, this is probably his most angry. And then he recounted the things that he was less angry. So his most angry was he was at a point where he burst out and he wanted to destroy all of them. And that's how angry God was. And Moses prayed and interceded before God. Now, we haven't finished that story yet. The story will come in verse 25. The anger of God was also expressed at Tavera at Massa, right? At, where is this? It's Kifrot Hatava. Kifrot Hatava. In these two locations, it's very important for us to understand. There are these few locations where God was particularly angry with them, right? So let me just refer you to the passages and we won't go through them. The first one is in Numbers 11, in verse 3 onwards. Okay. The second one about Massa was in Exodus 17, and you'll be able to read that. The third place was also in Numbers 11, and it has to do with Tavera as well, and it's about wanting to eat meat. First, they had manna or man, and then God gave them quail, but God destroyed some of them, that you made God angry. And likewise, the Lord sent you from Kadesh Barnea. And this is, again, Numbers 32 is a recall. Chapter 13 is where this took place, right? And chapter 13 is a pivotal passage. And let's be very, very clear with that. And this is a time where they went in, they did not believe him, and they rebelled against the Lord, and they decided not to go in. Now, verse 25 is the same 40 days and 40 nights. So it keeps talking about that same 40 days and 40 nights. And remember that these are the three things. The first one was to receive the 10 commandments. The second was when God was angry and Moses bowed down before God and pleaded with God for the people and for Aaron. And verse 25 describes the third particular incident that I actually fell to my face, prostrated. Literally means to fall down, right? And it actually says fall down to the face of God. And this is all the way down. And this is really humility. And I kept prostrating myself because God says that he will destroy you. And this is how Moses pleaded with God. And so when God was so angry, and Moses knew God very well, and that anger of God is about God going to completely destroy Israel. And now, at the very end of this passage, he says, I prayed, I interceded to the Lord, and this was what Moses said. And so it's worthwhile looking at the prayer of Moses. Oh Lord God, do not destroy your people. The idea here of destroy is really to ruin, is to corrupt. All right, there's the same word. And the word that they had gone to be wicked is the same word that God says, that Moses says, don't corrupt your people. And it is really your people, God. It's not my people. It's not the people. And the same thing that you want, they did to you, don't do to them. Because they are your inheritance. The idea of inheritance means that they are actually your possession. Your possession. And it is something that you have taken upon yourself from the offspring of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which you have redeemed through your greatness. Notice, whatever we say about redemption, this is the idea of redemption is pada. It is to return to the original land. And so Jacob brought them down to Egypt, and God, through Moses, redeemed them from Egypt back to the promised land. That is what redeem actually means. And what did God do to redeem? God used his mighty hand, that you brought them out of Egypt with a mighty hand, with an outstretched arm. And so he reminded God, he says, remember your servants, O God, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Do not look on the stubbornness of this people or on their wickedness or their sin. Just look at all this. 3 words. Verse 27, stubbornness is obstinate. Don't look at their obstinance, the obstinacy. That's basically what it means. All right. It means that the picture of this is where all the stalks of the wheat is all bundled together. And so you can see all the stalks are bundled together. That's what it means by stubborn. The second word here is their wickedness. And the wickedness here is rasha. Rasha means their departure from your word. And their sin is hata. They are miss. They just miss one thing. They turn away from your word. They were stiff-necked. So there are 3 things here. An A and a B and a C. And all 3 is to go against God. Lest the land from which you brought us should say. What do you mean the land that you brought us? This is Egypt. And the Egyptians will say, wow, do you see? Moses brought them out, and this God of the Israelites brought them out to die. That Jehovah God was not able to bring them into the land which he promised them. Why? Because now, after everything, that God hated them. Now, understand this. The word hated is sina, right? The word sina. Now, this is a very important word. It's like sane. It's to turn away. That God turned away from you, and then God decided to do what? You bring them out to kill them in the wilderness. And verse 29 is the final verse that we have to end here. He says, they are your people, your inheritance, O God. They are not my people. They are not the people. It is your people whom you brought out by your mighty power and by your outstretched arm. And that's an A and a B. And an A and a B. God, these are yours. And God, you have used your power, your greatness. You have devised them to come out. And this is to be continued tomorrow. And with this, we have not completed yet, but we will complete this tomorrow. And we are here at the end of chapter 9.